You ready to dive into some seriously unusual weapons that are actually legal to own here in the U.S.?
Let's do it.
Okay, so get this. We're not just talking about your typical guns, okay?
Right.
We're going way beyond into a world that's, well, kind of fascinating, ain't he? A bit freaky all at the same time.
Yeah,
This is all based on
it is pretty wild.
this video we found about the top 7 outrageous weapons that are, get this, totally legal to own here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of times when people think about the Second Amendment, their minds automatically go to firearms, right? But history shows us a much wider variety of weaponry, some of which is, believe it or not, still used today.
Okay, like blowguns.
Okay,
I
like
mean, those things have
blowgun.
been around forever.
Yeah.
But what blows my mind is that researchers are still using them, like, to study lizards.
Yeah, blowguns offer this unique combination of accuracy and low impact, which makes them perfect for things like delivering tranquilizers to small, agile creatures without causing them harm.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a really great example of how a tool can be adapted for different purposes over time.
Totally. Okay, so from ancient weapons to modern tech,
Hmm.
our source also mentions these things called LED incapacitators,
Mm.
which are basically like a flashlight with a secret superpower, right?
Yeah, so imagine this, right? A blinding light show, okay?
Okay.
And this light show causes intense disorientation, splitting headaches, even vomiting. That's an LED incapacitator for ya.
Oh, wow.
It basically overwhelms the visual system with a rapidly flashing light, and that temporarily disables the individual.
That's crazy. And I remember reading somewhere that the military actually has their own version of this thing called the Dazzler.
Right, and while the military version is, definitely off limits to civilians, there are actually DIY versions out there.
No way.
Yeah, thanks to some, let's just say, clever reverse engineering.
That's wild. It really makes you think about, like, the ethics of using something like that.
Right, right.
Okay, so let's shift gears now from modern non-lethal weapons to some with a bit more, let's say, historical edge, like the chain whip.
Okay.
You ever seen one of those things? They're intimidating, effective, and totally legal in most states, right?
Yeah, that's right. The chain whip has a really long history in Chinese martial arts, going all the way back to the Jin Dynasty.
Wow.
It's basically a handle, a series of metal rods, and then these rings that form like a flexible chain.
Oh, I see.
And it can be used for whipping, slashing, or even piercing.
Definitely not something you'd want to run into at a dark alley, that's for sure.
No, for sure not.
But hey, if you live in Maryland, New York, or California, you don't have to worry about it because it's banned in those states,
Right.
which is interesting. Okay, so speaking of weapons with a historical edge that are still used today, what about crossbows? I feel like those have made a comeback in recent years.
Crossbows have been around for centuries. They basically combine the power of a bow and arrow, but with a sight for aiming, which makes them incredibly accurate. Primarily used for hunting, though.
Yeah, and thanks to shows like The Walking Dead, they've had a resurgence in pop culture too.
For sure.
But there are some pretty interesting regulations around them, right?
Yes, absolutely. In most states, they're only legal to use during archery season. Oregon is the exception. They're legal year-round.
Oh, wow. It's interesting how those regulations vary from state to state, huh? Okay, are you ready to crank up the intensity a notch?
Always.
All right, let's enter the world of miniguns.
Now we're talking.
I mean, when you say minigun, we're specifically referring to the M134 General Electric model, right?
Right, yeah.
This 6-barrel rotary machine gun that has an absolutely mind-blowing rate of fire, like between 2,000 and 6,000 rounds per minute.
That's a lot of lead.
It's insane. But wait a minute, aren't automatic rifles illegal here in the U.S.?
Right, and that's where things get, well, pretty interesting.
Yep.
You see, the M134 isn't technically considered an automatic rifle under U.S. law because it requires a mount to operate,
Oh, I see.
and this distinction comes from the legal definition of an automatic rifle, which really focuses on portability and handheld use. So because the M134 has to be mounted, it falls into a different category, making it legal to own with the proper permits, of course.
Well, that is a fascinating legal loophole. Though with a price tag of around $40,000, it's not exactly an impulse buy.
That is true.
All right, so let's move on to another weapon that I think causes a lot of confusion, and that's grenade launchers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'd think those would only be for the military, but that's not the case, is it?
That's right. Civilians can actually own grenade launchers in the U.S.
Seriously.
Yeah, although the process is, let's just say it's pretty involved. It requires obtaining an ATF permit, passing a super rigorous background check, and also getting sign-off from, like, a chief law enforcement officer.
Wow, so it's not easy, but it's possible.
It is possible, yep.
All right, well, we've saved well, let's just say the most fiery for last. The flamethrower.
Ah, we're getting to the good stuff.
I know, right? I mean, flamethrowers, those things just conjure up images of, like, total chaos and destruction, but they are actually legal for civilians to own in the U.S.
You got it.
I mean, seriously, that's just wild. Why is that?
You know, it really comes down to the difficulty in actually classifying flame-based devices under the law. It's like the law hasn't quite caught up with this type of weaponry, you know?
It's crazy to think about.
And here's the funny part. Flamethrowers are actually banned in warfare by the Geneva Convention.
What?
Yeah.
So you're telling me I can use a flamethrower to, like, clear brush in my backyard, but not in a war?
Yeah, that's the paradox, isn't it?
That's incredible. And I heard they're actually becoming pretty popular these days. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. Crowdfunding campaigns for models like the XM42 have been insanely successful, which kind of shows you how fascinated people are with these things.
I guess there's something about fire that just captivates us, huh?
For sure.
Well, we've covered some truly fascinating and, let's be honest, sometimes kind of unsettling legal weapons in this first part of our deep dive. It's amazing to think about the range of weaponry out there, from like those ancient blowguns to modern-day flamethrowers, and that it's all legally accessible in the U.S.
Welcome back to our deep dive into surprisingly legal weapons. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing to think about the sheer range of weaponry that exists out there, right? From those with roots going back centuries to the ones pushing the boundaries of technology today.
It really is. And, you know, that evolution of weaponry kind of leads to some pretty interesting legal and ethical questions, especially when you start thinking about things like 3D printed guns, for example.
Oh, yeah, 3D printed guns. I remember reading a little bit about those. They weren't on our list from the video, but I've definitely heard about them making waves. They sound like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
They kind of are. Essentially, you know, anyone with a 3D printer and access to the internet can download designs and create their own firearm.
Wow, I mean, it's incredible, but also a little unnerving,
Yeah.
right? Like, what are the legal implications of that?
It's a huge gray area. Proponents of 3D printed guns argue that it's a form of free speech and a right to self-defense, right?
Right.
But then, of course, you have those who are strongly opposed to it, who are concerned about, you know, untraceable weapons falling into the wrong hands. And honestly, the technology is way ahead of the regulations in this case.
That's a good point. It really makes you think about how technology is constantly changing the landscape of weaponry, and the law is always playing catch-up.
It is, it is.
And speaking of advanced technology, you know, we hear a lot about those directed energy weapons these days.
Oh, absolutely.
What can you tell us about those?
So we're talking things like lasers, sonic weapons, you know, even microwave devices. A lot of this stuff is being developed for military use right now.
Right.
And while it's still largely in the experimental phase, it's pretty fascinating to think about the potential applications, right? I mean, even in, like, civilian self-defense someday.
Yeah, it really is. It's mind-blowing to consider how warfare and even just personal protection could be completely revolutionized by that type of technology.
Yeah.
But, you know, even with all these incredible high-tech advancements happening, sometimes the simplest tools can be just as effective and maybe even more unsettling, right?
Absolutely. You take something as simple as a knife, for example.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a knife is a tool that's been around for centuries, but
Yeah.
it can be incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands.
For sure.
And the fact that they're so accessible and easy to conceal makes them a really persistent threat.
That's true. It's a good reminder that the danger isn't always about how complex or advanced the weapon is. It's really about the intent of the person wielding it. It ultimately comes down to personal responsibility.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if we're talking about a firearm, a chain whip, a crossbow, or even a kitchen knife, right? The
No.
responsibility ultimately lies with the individual. Education, training, and understanding the law are essential to ensure safe and responsible use.
Couldn't agree more. Knowledge is really paramount when it comes to anything potentially dangerous. But, you know, beyond just the practical and the legal aspects of all these weapons, there's also that psychological element to consider, right?
Oh, for sure.
I mean, weapons can be really powerful symbols.
It's true. Weapons can be seen as symbols of power, intimidation, sometimes even rebellion. And understanding those underlying meanings and the psychology behind them can be just as important as understanding, you know, the actual mechanics of the weapons themselves.
Yeah, it's like we're not only examining the weapons themselves, but also what they represent in our society and why people are drawn to them in the first place.
Exactly. I mean, we've been diving deep into the what and the how of all these unusual weapons, but the why is just as important, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why are these things legal? Why do people choose to own them? I mean, it's a really complex web of historical, social, and psychological factors that are definitely worth unpacking further. And, while this topic is definitely serious, I think it's also okay to acknowledge the kind of strange and fascinating aspects of it, too. I mean, after all, we are talking about some pretty out there weaponry.
I agree. It's definitely a balance between acknowledging the very real, serious implications and then also, just appreciating the unique and sometimes almost unbelievable aspects of it all.
Speaking of unbelievable, before we go on to our last part, I'd love to hear from you, our listener. What's the most unusual weapon you've ever encountered? I mean, whether it was in real life, a movie, a book, even a video game. Think about what made it stand out to you and how it made you feel. We'll be right back to wrap things up and hear some of your responses in part 3. And we are back for the final part of our deep dive into surprisingly legal weapons. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From ancient tools to cutting-edge technology, even the legal and psychological sides of it all.
It has been quite the journey. We've explored history, technology, law, even human psychology.
Yeah. What's been the biggest takeaway for you?
For me, I think it's the sheer variety of weaponry out there and the complex web of reasons behind their legality. It really makes you question your assumptions about what a weapon even is and why some things are so tightly controlled while others are readily available.
I agree. It definitely challenges your perspective. For me, it's that realization that the whole conversation about weapons, it's much bigger than just firearms.
Right.
It's about tools and technology and history and even our own desires for safety or maybe even control sometimes.
You hit the nail on the head there. And the thing is, with technology constantly evolving, this conversation is only going to get more complex.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, just think about what we were talking about before, 3D printed guns, the potential of those directed energy weapons. It's incredible how quickly the landscape of weaponry can change.
It really is. And it raises so many questions, doesn't it? Like, how do we regulate these new technologies? How do we balance individual freedoms with public safety as things advance? These are questions that lawmakers and researchers, really society as a whole, are going to have to grapple with.
It makes it even more important to stay informed, and to really engage in thoughtful discussions about these issues. We can't just pretend these advancements aren't happening.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, and the more we understand about these technologies and why they're being developed, the better prepared we'll be to face those ethical and legal challenges they present.
Well said. I think we've only just scratched the surface here.
We have.
But hopefully, this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, gotten you thinking a little differently about this world of weaponry that exists beyond the headlines.
Absolutely. Maybe it's even inspired you to do some more digging on your own.
Right, like what other unusual weapons are out there? What's the history behind them? What are the legal and ethical debates surrounding them? I mean, there's a whole world of fascinating information out there waiting to be discovered.
Exactly. And we always love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, we do. What surprised you most about this episode? What questions are you still thinking about? Share your thoughts with us. Let's keep this conversation going. Because, like we've seen, the world of weaponry is constantly changing, and it's a topic that deserves our attention and careful consideration.
Absolutely. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, knowledge is the most powerful weapon we have.